In this episode, I explore how to introduce mysticism into your games, the joys of running long-lasting campaigns, and I challenge you all with a segment about knowledge and lore skills. Welcome to the Mythras Matters podcast, Season 1, Episode 58, Lore, Mystics, and the Joys of Campaigns. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I am your host inwils and welcome to June. We've had some of those weekends when we have not been able to play our usual campaigns. I've often thought about having something in reserve when we can't play, but I've never worked out what or how to actually implement it. I've always been more of a campaign GM rather than a one-shot person. I know that one-shots can be extremely enjoyable, but for me, I like how characters and players progress through a campaign. In one of our recent gaming sessions, we started to reminisce about what had gone before in the campaign and what the characters had achieved. Bartleby is currently the longest lasting member of the group, and he actually played a completely different character, Ida Macduff, when he started to play to see if he enjoyed the system. That encouraged him to create Bartleby and to become the group's support system. But reminiscing is just one aspect of the campaigns that I enjoy. When players and characters have been adventuring for a long period of time, they learn how each of them will act or react in certain situations. This makes the gameplay more fluid and they rarely contradict each other's actions, although the characters still do rush off into combat before Bartleby can lay his hands on them and give them a suitable buff. And then there is the progression of power. I remember when the characters were just starting out using basic folk magic or first order spells to fight their opponents. With weapon skills low, combat frequently lasted a lot longer, mainly because no one could actually hit anything. I remember the combat between the party and a giant caterpillar when they were investigating the library of the mystics. That poor animal just got so fatigued that it just gave up in the end and let itself be butchered. Oh, and more about mystics later on in the podcast. But my favourite aspect of any campaign has to be the interactions that occur. These are the interactions between each other, but also the interactions with the campaign world itself. I've enjoyed developing plot lines with the characters and making them part of the various communities they've interacted with, and in doing so they have become part of the world that they venture into every gaming session. Who would have thought that that first inn they lodged in, the Hairy Hobgoblin run by Basil, would be their home for so many adventures, and they would return to help Basil, including the time that they saved the whole inn when it was threatened by the setting up of Christoph's Inn across the street. I know that sometimes playing one-offs can be really enjoyable. You can have fun with the adventure and the pre-made characters, but for me, nothing matches that involvement of a campaign. Yes, we might not play for a few weekends, but when we get back together, we soon pick up where we left off, and immediately we get back into that ebb and flow of the campaign. So what about you? Do you prefer one-offs or campaigns? And what are you playing at the moment? Do let me know in the comments below this video or podcast on YouTube. Thank you for all your support you provide for my content, and do check out my Ko-fi site. This is a one-stop place for all the RPG content we produce. And talking about campaigns, some players have left over the years, and on my Ko-fi site I've written a blog about why players leave my campaigns. Definitely worth a read. Later on in this episode I want to talk about lore skills, but before that I want to continue to look at introducing the magic systems of Mythras into your campaigns. Although my first love will always be sorcery, sorry people, in this episode I want to talk about probably the most flexible magic system in Mythras, Mysticism. So what is mysticism? That would be a good place to start. Well, according to the core rulebook, mysticism is the implementation of phenomenal abilities by the force of one's willpower. Mystics do not study spells, but learn to channel their energies to enhance their capabilities. The path of mysticism encourages a philosophy of self-improvement as it augments skills and the capabilities of the user. So mystics have two main skills. Now these cover a range of different elements, and you can go to the core rulebook and check up on all of these. But just to give you an indication, one of the skills is called meditation. That is a measure of how powerful the talents can be. And the other skill is mysticism, which is the casting skill of the mystic. So when they want to invoke something, they roll their mysticism. All this information leads many people to think of the classic monks of any fantasy situation. The monks who can use their talents to be better fighters or enhance their skills and attributes, and who can cut arrows from the air, climb nearly vertical walls with ease, and can reduce their breathing and heart rate to require less oxygen to survive. When I first started to play Mythras, I immediately slipped into the comfortable lore of mystics being these monks. I think the mystic talents are very powerful, and immediately I wanted to restrict them. Now stop shouting at the podcast, all the listeners that feel sorcery is more powerful than the mystics. I did restrict sorcery as well. But to restrict mysticism even more, I created one path that all the mystics followed. This was the order of the tranquil wind. And I'll leave a link to the article I wrote about this in the show notes that will link to my World Anvil site. But as I started to think more about mysticism, I discovered that they are not really only limited to the classic monk character. When we return to the definition of what mysticism is, you can see that the mystic channels energies to enhance their capabilities. Now, with the classic monks, this energy is the key or some sort of other energy. But why could that energy not come from a different source? For example, a demon lord. This was the inspiration for Ulrich, a GM-controlled character that adventured with the party for a while after their main tank, Hengist, had left the campaign. Ulrich's energies came from a demon lord he worshipped and followed. The principle of the pact between them was that the demon lord gave Ulrich the powers he needed in return for Ulrich performing a specific rite over anyone he killed, so condemning their soul to his demon lord. When first introduced to the party, Ulrich said that his lord, Vex, had told him to travel with the group for a while. They all assumed that Lord Vex was the Lord of a Manor sort of lord. Little did they know. Coupled with some folk magic spells, Ulrich channeled his lord's power in a number of ways. Soul-biting and enhanced actions allowed him to become more effective in combat, increasing the number of actions he had and reduced the difficulties of his attacks. He had an aura of fear that, when activated, he could approach opponents and see them be paralyzed with or flee in fear. He also had dark sight to see in the dark. Ulrich was a heavy tank character who was also a mystic, and this only was the start for this character. I would have loved to play him more in a campaign where I could increase his fighting prowess further, giving him talents such as pain control and augmenting more of his skills so he would be able to progress better. He would have been a fantastic character to play. From this, you can see that introducing mysticism, I think, is just thinking about where those energies come from that cause the character to evoke their power. We created a similar barbarian character early on in the campaign who would let out his battle cry that allowed his combat swings to be easier. You guessed it, a Mythras character with rage. I've spoken about the following in a different episode, but I can see bards being mystics as well. Their auras being generated by the playing of their instruments. They could inspire their colleagues in battle by reciting battle poems about their exploits and increase the chance of influencing their opponents in social conflicts by using their lyrical tones. Oh, and remember that the powers do not need to come from demon lords. If you reverse where the powers came from and link characters to their favourite deities, we have mystics that are the equivalent of paladins, fighters for good, wielding the powers of the divine. You don't have to be a theist to use the gifts from the gods. The more I think about mystics, the more I enjoy reveling in the flexibility of their magic. I think it is probably the easiest of all the magic systems to implement into the game, and I have to say that when players come up with characters' ideas that do not fit into the usual magic systems, I tend to reach for mysticism. So let your imagination be your guide and focus on where energies originate from when designing your mystics. And remember, they don't all have to get the power from the same source. And if you have any other great ideas about how you've worked mystics into your campaign, then do put them on in the comment section of this podcast episode on YouTube. It is always great to hear from you all, and I love hearing your ideas. I'll leave a link to the YouTube playlist in the show notes. Remember, if you would like to contribute to the podcast, then why not just drop me an email or message and let me know what you would like to cover. I'm always looking for reviews or interviews with people, so come along and have a chat with me. If you're interested, you can email me at inwils@gmail.com or send me a message on the various forums I frequent. Okay, for the final segment of this month's episode, I want to talk about lore skills or knowledge skills. Within our M-Space campaign, I've been thinking about the skills necessary to make a classic science officer character. You know, the sort of character that knows everything about anything. This got me thinking about law or knowledge skills and how there must be different levels of knowledge and how they interact and relate to each other. For example, if a character knows about electronics, some of that knowledge must be transferable to, say, communications or computers or sensors. I'm just talking about general stuff here, and this is coming from someone who has no technical skills in either computers, sensors, or communications. It would be the same in a fantasy setting as well. If someone has law of herbalism, they must also have some knowledge and understanding of botany. Then that started me to think about different levels of knowledge. For example, if you take the subject of chemistry, there must be some basic understanding of chemistry that many people know. For example, the difference between a molecule and an atom. But then there must be more complex knowledge, say, for example, organic chemistry and benzene rings. Bear with me, I am going somewhere with all this. So how do we ensure that a wealth of law and knowledge skills are used in our campaigns? Or if we have that above mentioned science officer who has several knowledge skills, how do we ensure that they get to use all their skills in our campaigns? And while I'm on a roll with this, how do we make space for knowledge skills in our campaigns without anyone just relying on a good research skill to find the answers on the internet? Just so you know, I've started to put all my ideas into a video with several reference sheets to look out for as well when that video comes out. But I really like to know what your ideas about this are and how you use law or knowledge skills in your campaigns. So please do put your ideas in the comment section. And don't worry, if I like or use any of them in any video or anything else that I produce, I will give you credit. So go for it. How do you deal with law and knowledge skills in your campaigns? And that's it. Another episode of Mythras Matters completed. Don't forget you can check out all my content by following my YouTube channel and the campaign areas on World Anvil. I've released all my content on World Anvil, so you don't have to support me with your hard-earned cash to see it. But there is an option to donate if you wish. I really appreciate your support, and do check out the Tapper Talk forums and the Discords when there are some great people there sharing their ideas within discussions. So until next time, have a great month of gaming, and I will chat to you all again in July. Until then, I hope all your opposed rolls succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening, everyone. See ya. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you.